All right, good morning, everybody, to our first actual session in Math 143. Just to start things off, since this is only our second day, just want to check that wherever you are watching, that you can hear and see me, and everything on the technical side seems good. And I also want to remind those that are in D2L that I cannot guarantee that I'm going to use D2L for very long. As soon as it causes some latency issues, I have to turn it off. So if you haven't yet, please uh, see if you can use Discord and YouTube instead. All right. So let us begin. Our first topic is on patterns and sequences, where it's very much an introduction, but we are going to just get a peek of which direction this could go in. Like many topics, there's really no end to the complexity. So we want to have an introduction and a good idea uh, of the topic without getting too complicated. So we have our first exercise that we will start with, sort of starting at the elementary school worksheet level, where we have a couple of patterns just in uh, images, a pattern of images. And the first goal is to see, do I notice anything? And can I explain it? And in that explanation, find or try and predict what the next image should be according to the pattern that I see. With this topic, it is a little bit open-ended in the beginning, that someone might see a pattern that's different than mine, but as long as you can sort of defend it and explain it for why you think that question mark should be a specific image, then it's perfectly okay. We are at the mercy of the images that we have to work with. And if those aren't many, then the pattern might not be necessarily unique. As we start writing, I'll notice if D2L is causing any problems. In Discord, is the sound still good? As soon as it cuts out, let me know, because of course I can't hear what you're hearing. It might just be D2L. Like I said, we're not going to stick with D2L for very long. I just want to give people a chance to cross over to Discord and YouTube within this week, because I know it has been causing a lot of issues. So it seems to just be on the D2L side. And I have tested it last semester as well. As soon as I turn it off, and everything's perfect. So I know that, unfortunately, is a little bit of a problem. Okay, so in number one, let me just start numbering these things. So we're going to write our notes here in case my cables are all tangled up. 1 second. There we go. We're going to have our notes here. We're going to start with, yeah, see, I can already notice. If you can get into YouTube or Discord as quickly as you can today, even, I'm not going to be able to handle D2L for very long, unfortunately. So in number one, we have a fairly obvious pattern. We all have squares throughout, so the next one we can predict would be a square. Then we have diagonal lines alternating, so I can defend and say, well, it goes this way, then that way, this way, then that way, this way, then that way, so it has to be, well, not has to be, I predict that in number one, it has to be, which way did I say? uh, that way, or this way rather, like that. So the writing's not going to be very good because of the latency that D2L is causing. So see, look at that. So from tomorrow, we're going to not use D2L anymore. I can't write. It's very hard for me, and it doesn't look as good. But we'll try and manage for today so that people have another chance to switch over. So here we see a technically more complicated pattern in number 2. We all have little rectangles throughout, so that will be a rectangle. See what happens here. Oh, it's because I pressed something, right? It's now suddenly. It doesn't like me. Little technical difficulties. Let's just see. Why is it not having the right cursor here? 1 second. What is happening? Oh, I see there's a severe delay. Yeah, I see. So what I'm pressing is not what I'm seeing at all, and then I don't understand what is happening. Okay, there's no choice. I have to turn D2L off. I simply cannot write with it on. What I'm doing and pressing, I don't see the reaction, and unfortunately it's D2L. I did mention this yesterday. Uh, so go to the YouTube channel, or you'll have to watch the recording after, but I unfortunately cannot uh, do anything while the D2L screen is running. It's just unfortunately reality. I did warn everyone that this was going to happen. So for the 2 people that are still in D2L, I apologize, but I literally can't do anything with it open. The latency is just terrible. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop that application. 1 second while I do that. Please switch over. About a week to figure it out anyway. So okay, so I'm just closing everything. Happy. Well, first week technical issues. So much fun. Now you can't see what's on the screen. It completely so it doesn't send any further issues. There we go. Should be good. Check if the YouTube chat is even working. Yeah, just some patience. My computer is unhappy with what I'm asking it to do. Not responding. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves if you have any questions. Now's a good time, if you can even still hear me. Everything is just freezing up, which is always lovely. Some button is automatically being pressed, I can tell. Yeah. Is unhappy today. Why? Why? I pressed the button and now I think it keeps thinking I'm pressing the button for some reason. Why? Just make me look bad, computer. Come on. Let's see. Not in that. Sorry, things are just not responsive on my end at all. I don't know why. Assuming everyone can still hear me at least. What's happening? Try and close everything I have opened that could possibly be causing an issue. Okay. Of course, when you test these things, right, everything's fine, and then it just waits for people to be here, and then nope, we're not gonna let you do anything. Thing is weird, and I don't know what it is. Mouse isn't working. Let me just see. Okay, trying to open Krita again, so we can start writing and see if that works. Day one, apparently yesterday. We didn't test this part, I suppose, so it's my fault. Yeah. Should have written some stuff and see if that works, but it always works. My mouse wheel doesn't want to work. That's okay, I don't need that to work. Let's see if pen works. Pen has a weird, see, I'm pressing, something's being pressed automatically and I don't know what. It should just be a normal cursor. My pen, why? Why would you do this to me? Ching, you're embarrassing me. It has happened before. I can't remember how I fixed it. Writing one. No, that doesn't work. Let's try an eraser. It's the color. Oh, there's some signs of life. I don't know what I did, but apparently it's fixed. Alright, that's good to know. I wish I knew what I did. You start to randomly press buttons in a panic and then magically things happen. Okay, so our first one was, see how much smoother it is now? Not that my writing will ever really improve, let's be honest, but at least it's better. So if you're in YouTube, I know you can hear me. I can't see the chat right now either. Day one issues. We should all be in Discord anyway. Okay. Now, what I said here was we have some rectangles. Let's draw a rectangle. Rectangle. And then we see, okay, it's a vertical line, horizontal line, vertical line, diagonal, vertical line, horizontal line, vertical line, diagonal. Oh, can't see the screen anymore. Those things are important. Those things are important. Thanks for letting me know. I assure you, and those from 142 can confirm, this is not how every lecture is gonna go. Usually everything is quite smooth, which makes it such a surprise when things get weird, because you don't expect it. Okay, so vertical line, horizontal, vertical line, diagonal. It's like a song. Vertical line, horizontal, vertical line, diagonal, vertical line, horizontal. 3. Okay, so here we have some polygons. We have the number of sides decreasing, 6, 5, 4. So the next shape will be a triangle. I know that's what everyone was thinking. Number 4, we have sort of a rectangle-ish shape with nice curvy corners, and then a smaller version of that that is shaded, then some sort of oval shape with a smallish, more balanced version that's shaded, and so they seem to come in pairs. So this one is a long triangle, so what I expect here following that pattern is equilateral triangle that is shaded in. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, right? This is just our introduction. The technical difficulties just made it really necessarily. But at an elementary school level, where we're introducing the idea of recognizing a pattern and then continuing it to predict the next item in a sequence, it's a good starting point. But of course, we can't do much with just shapes. It's a little limiting, and we can't really uh, express and explain patterns very efficiently. When it comes to shapes, we kind of have to just do it in words. So it limits the complexity and full exploration of this topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift over to patterns and sequences of numbers. So we have our next exercise, and of course, the standard line is if you have any questions or any comments or anything, not technical, just anything, feel free to interrupt me at any stage. Exercise 1.2. Oh, the writing is so much smoother now. So we have our sequence here. Now, I'm not going to open this back and forth every time. You have access to the book. You can see the book. I'm going to move it to my other screen. And that way, I don't have to open windows back and forth. It's going to be a little bit nicer on the screen. But I'll write the sequence for you anyway. 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, and it continues. And the question asks, identify the pattern just in words for now and find the next term or predict what the next term might be. My best guess. So when you look at this sequence of numbers, do you see a pattern? First question. And then can you explain what pattern you see? Now we of course still start out very simply, so there should be, if you do see a pattern, it should be fairly easy to explain just in words, right? So what would you say is the pattern that you see in this first sequence? So we're just doing it in words. Could be a lot of words, could be few words, but that's more than sufficient at this stage. Now I want this to be a discussion, a conversation, which means sometimes it's nice for you to say something too. Just see if you are understanding these things as you should. It's nice to sometimes say something out loud to hear how that sounds. What is the pattern that I see here?
And increase 3 each time you go up.
Every time it increases by 3. So we'll just say increases by 3 each time. And of course, the words you use could be many other words too, right? So if I then follow that, I'll put it in a box. My prediction for the next term will be 16. And I can, of course, keep going. They're just asking for one of them, the next one. My best guess. Not too bad. 1, 4, 8, 13, 19, dot, dot, dot. First of all, actually before that, before I make a prediction, do I see a pattern? And can I briefly explain what I see? So the first one had just a number added every time to go from one to the next. Okay, that was pretty easy. I can now take that experience that I have gained from that example and try it on this one. So now the number isn't always the same, right? But I'm adding 3 to go from 1 to 4. Then I'm adding 4. Then I'm adding 5. Then I'm adding 6. So it's reasonable to think the next one will be adding 7 to give me a guess of 26. There's no guarantee that that is uh, actually what the next one is. It could be a little bit more uh, complicated. And if you remember 142, inductive reasoning is what we're doing when we're basing our uh, prediction on a limited number of examples, a limited pattern sequence. We don't really know with 100% certainty, but I can explain what I see and I can convince someone else that, yeah, it's probably 26. So it's sufficient to have some diagrams underneath here. We don't have to write full sentences or anything. It's just about seeing the pattern. So in this case, it wasn't quite as simple, but there was an obvious pattern in the numbers that I add. It goes up by 1 every time. So I could definitely exploit that to predict the next one. Next sequence, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. Do you see a pattern in this one? And if so, what is it? Silence. We can't be silent yet. Wait for things
The
to get
number
difficult.
doubles every time. So
The number
2 times
doubles
2
every
is
time.
4.
So, right, we don't have to. Hold on, my pen is weird. Yeah. We don't have to add something every time. We could multiply. In this case, multiply by 2. 2, 2. So I'm expecting that to continue, and that would predict the next one to be 32. My pen is a little thick. Let's try smaller. Okay, good. So it could be addition, could be multiplication. Technically, it could be subtraction and division as well, but we're trying to keep things nice and simple. So let's see what number 4 is. Now, every time I look at a sequence, I've gained some experience. And I can use that experience to recognize more patterns. I now realize that, oh, it could be multiplication as well. So now it could be addition or multiplication or subtraction or division, and now I'm looking for all of those things. I have more options in terms of how to recognize patterns. And in this case, I realize, oh, multiplication by 10 every time. That works, so I will expect it to continue, and therefore the next one will be 100,000. Quite straightforward, I hope. Then in number 5, I have the sequence 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and so on. Do I see a pattern there? And if so, what is it? Often, like in this one, there are multiple things I could see. They're all going to predict perhaps the same thing, but I can explain it in different ways. Someone might see one pattern, and someone else might see another pattern. What do you see? This sequence. No, I don't see
The answers.
silence. Say again?
Oh, The additive increases by 2 each time, starting with 3, then going to 5 to 7 to 9, and
Yeah,
then
so based on
remove
my
the 11.
experience, I could add 3 and then 5 and then 7. And notice that, yeah, there is a pretty obvious pattern in the numbers that I add. So there are different layers here. A layer below the actual sequence is also a sequence. And the pattern could be more obvious in that layer to predict what the next one could be. So I'm adding increasing odd numbers to make a prediction of 36. This is one way to explain, and it's perfectly fine. Another way to make the same prediction is to say, okay, well, let me just rewrite this so it doesn't get too cluttered, and maybe move this up as well. Let's think about the positions that these numbers are in. This is the first one, and I'm going to do not confuse the actual number and actual sequence here versus its position. I'll put the position in brackets. This 4 is in position 2, then the next number is in position 3, position 4, position 5, and I'm trying to predict position 6. So instead of going from one number in the sequence to the next, these numbers in the sequence are called terms of the sequence because they don't always have to be numbers. Terms in the sequence. Instead of going from one term to the next, in my first way of establishing a pattern, I could try and find a link between the term and the position it's in. And in this case, let's say it like this, we get not apparently, the term by squaring the position, I'll call it value, the position value squared, so multiplied by itself, gives me the term in that position. Now it seems like overkill in this case because we had a pattern and it was perfectly fine giving us 36. But moving forward, we have to notice that there are different ways to explain patterns. It could be one term to the next, systematically working my way forward, or it could be a link between the position and the term in that position. Position value is 1, 1 times 1. Position value is 2, 2 times 2. Position 3, 3 times 3. Position 4, 4 times 4. Position 5, 5 times 5. Position 6, and I get my 36 again. Just different ways to explain the same thing. Okay, that's very important. We can have different ways of explaining essentially the same thing. It's the same sequence. It's the same number in the box, but a different way of explaining and noticing a pattern that defines the sequence. Any questions or thoughts on that as I make a new page? Still, we're trying to go nice and slow. If nothing else, I have to try and recover from Christmas break and get into learning again. Rush things. Right, I'm just happy that everything is working as it should. That was number 5. Number 6. I'm actually going to change number 6. There's a typo in number 6. It should be 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9. Then the question is, this one seems a little bit more up and down. Do we see a pattern? And can I use that pattern to predict the next number? Does anyone see anything in this one? Whether your answer is yes or no, notice what we're trying to do when I ask that question. What you're doing, or what I would be doing, is drawing on your experience up to this point. What have I seen so far? And does any of those patterns, types, work on this one? I'm building up my experience, and the more things I see, the more variety and all that, the more my experience becomes, and the better I'm able to see different sequences and patterns and work with them. But there's no pattern in this one. Nothing's going to work. Nothing's going to work. It's just random numbers. I want to be comfortable sometimes not having an answer. I don't see any pattern. And at this stage, at this level, that's okay. We have very limited experience. Of course, we won't be able to handle everything. This is coincidentally the digits of pi. And that's known to have no pattern. Pi, if I put a little decimal there, is a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal, meaning there is never a pattern that could repeat or be exploited or anything. So I'm not expected to know everything. Of course not. This topic of sequences and patterns has no end to the difficulty. And I have very limited experience. So I just took these digits for fun. They have no pattern in them. And if I didn't know about pi, then I wouldn't even know that. So it's okay to not see a pattern from just 6 or 5 numbers. That's okay. So we want to give ourselves a fighting chance in our introduction and not just open it up to just anything, but stick to this idea of adding, multiplying. So that's a 9. Sort of connecting it to the experience that we have and just practicing that and getting more comfortable with that first, not opening it up to anything. It's too big of a topic and too intimidating at this stage. So now let's go back to something that's a little bit more comfortable perhaps, but the numbers are a little bigger. If I draw on my experience now is, yes, sometimes the pattern that could be there, I might just not see it. It might be too complicated for me to see, and that's okay. Or I try for familiar things like adding, multiplying. Even if the things I'm adding change, hopefully there's an obvious pattern in that level. So here I'll try, they seem to not grow fast enough for multiplication, right? So I'll try adding, 12 seems to work for the first one, and the next one, and the next one. Okay, that's nice. So that pattern is then even easier to explain than having these uh, numbers in the next layer be slightly different. So I'll add 12 to 59 and get 71. So now we're back to normal. Just be aware sometimes, in general, if I go out there and look at sequences and patterns, oh, things could be messy and weird, and I might not see a pattern, and that's okay. We want to have an introduction, so we'll limit ourselves to things we can handle at this stage. Just to emphasize that things can get weird and interesting and different. There's no end here, there's no limit. those that have done 142 might have a chance to notice this one. But it's totally fine if you don't. I don't blame you. I totally understand. But there are much more interesting things. Know that there are much more interesting things out there that an introduction doesn't necessarily want to cover. I'll give you a clue for this one. That's my clue. I'll give you more clue. Now I have to think about this. uh, so that's my clue.
Module 8? Counting.
It's not 8, but yes,
Oh,
if I count
7.
on a circle with 7 numbers and just go around and around and around, I am adding 5 to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, get to 6. To go from 6 to get to 4, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps again. But because I'm on the circle, now the sequence looks very different, even though it's still adding the same thing every time. 4 to 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. From 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. So the next one, counting from 0, will obviously be 5. So there are different components that I can sort of mix together and make sequences that if I didn't have the experience of seeing that circle, I wouldn't know. And that's okay. We're not expected to know. I won't ever ask you this again. I thought it nice to link something that I'm really at the mercy of my experience. And the more I see, slowly increasing complexity if I want to, the more experience I get and the better I can handle things and the more variety and so on. But for introduction, of course, we want to limit things uh, to a point where I see something that I have some variety, but it's not too scary and overwhelming. Okay, so let's go back to the very first one we did. Not the very, yeah, the very first one. Page here. Now, explaining what we see in words is all good and well, but it's not very efficient when it comes to numbers. Let's just go back to the very first one. 1, 3, was this one? Yeah, no, not 3. I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of the number you add. 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, and it goes on forever. Okay. So in words, so the pattern is simple enough that I can explain it in words. We start with 1 and then add 3 every time. I think most people will know what sequence to make if you tell them start with a 1 and add 3 every time. Can you make that sequence? They'll say yes, I can. But I need both of these pieces, right? You can't just tell me every time add 3. Can you make the sequence? Well, no. Where do I start? That changes things, right? So I need to explicitly say start at this number. And then I need to provide information for how to go from there and build the sequence out. I need both of those pieces to really clearly define this sequence. Just one of these two, and it's not going to be clear enough. So I need two things. That's the first thing I want to note. Two of them together explain the sequence. Right? So in words, it's totally fine. But if this was more complicated, then I can imagine that my words are going to be not the right language to explain this. So I want to switch to the mathematical language. Say the same thing, but in a language that is more suited for numbers and for technical things. Okay, now for that, we're going to come back and fill in this very ugly curly bracket. I need to just explain how this language is going to work. So, how do we talk about a sequence in this language? I'm going to have a sequence. I'll make space for it. And it'll be in the sequence will have terms in these positions, right? I always put my positions in brackets so that I know what is the sequence and what is the position values, so I don't get confused. I don't know what the sequence is specifically. In general, I just want to talk about a sequence and its terms without necessarily knowing what they are. So I'm going to call it A because it's the first letter in the alphabet. Why not? But now I don't want to call it A, B, C, D, E, and so on because the sequence might have more than 26 positions, and then I'm going to run out of letters and things are going to get complicated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick to A every time. But of course, these numbers could be different. So I'm going to give a little subscript that matches the position. So now A1 is the name of the term in position 1. A2 is the name of the term in position 2. And now the names are all different, but I'll never run out because the numbers can just increase forever, giving me a new name every time. If in general, sometimes I want to talk about a general position without specifying exactly which position I talk about, I'll use an N for just a position. For some, that position could be 100. For someone else, it could be 237. Doesn't matter. The name of the term in that position will have the subscript matching the position it's in. Okay. So this way provides me with a structured, consistent way of referring to different terms in the sequence, which might be needed as I go on with my discussion. Right. Does that feel okay? That's going to be the language, symbolic language that is mathematics. But it's going to allow me to explain much more technical things and work with them in calculations and so on. So now I'll write my sequence here again. What was it? 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, and so on. Now I'm going to do the same thing as I did in words. I'm going to say start with the term 1. Well, in the mathematical language, that means A1 is 1. Right? First guy. Different words to say the same thing. Different language to say the same thing. Now I have to say in this language that I should go from there and add 3 every time. And this is where people get a little confused, but it's only because it's maybe for the first time you're seeing this. Everything's weird the first time you do it or see it. Now I want to say, okay, I want to have this as concise and efficient as possible. So I'm going to say, okay, to find a term in some position n, give me anyone you want after the start. Let's do something specific. Let's do it more specifically. Okay, to find A2, what would I have to do? I have to take A1 and add 3. That's what we said in words, right? But that only gets me the next one. So now what do I have to do? I have to rewrite the same line, but to find A3, I'm going to have to add 3 to A2. The previous one adds 3. That only gets me to A3. So to get to the next one, I do a very similar thing, but the subscripts just update. To get A4, I need to take the previous one and add 3 to that. So what I'm writing here is pretty much always the same, except the subscripts just refer to different positions. So I can make that more general and say, I'm not going to put a specific number in here. Whichever one you want to find, whether it's the second position, the 100th position, I'm going to leave it open to you. And you can repeatedly use this rule. If you want to find something that is in position n for you, whatever that n may be, look at the previous one, which is in position 1 less, and add 3 to that. And this is going to apply when n is 2, 3, 4, and goes on forever. Because what I was writing systematically, explaining how to get the next term and the next term and the next term, they all looked like this. The subscripts were just different because it was referring to different positions. So I could make it a little bit more compact and say they all look like this. You might want to find the 5th position, then for you, for that immediate next step, n will be 5 if I want to find this one. Take the one before that, which would be n minus 1, 4. Take this one and add 3 to it, which is exactly what we said in words. This is just a different language to say the same thing. And I think that's the key thing here, is that we are not saying anything new, anything different, anything strange. It's as if you take the pattern that you said in English here and say it in French or another language. That if I'm not comfortable with French, it's going to sound extremely strange and I won't understand it. But if I slowly learn the French language, then translating that is no different. It means the exact same thing. It is simply a language issue. It just turns out that this mathematical language is much more effective in analyzing technical and explaining technical things with numbers and so on. But all we're doing is transitioning to a different language. We're saying the same things. Right? So I want to pause there and have that, just look at this and just have this language issue sink in. That is the key part to understanding how to read these formulas, if you will. That I can technically explain everything in words, it's just not that efficient. So we switch over to this mathematical language because it's much easier to explain and work with these kinds of things within that language. All right. Any comments on this? Any questions at this stage? Hopefully we have all the technical issues ironed out, and tomorrow the whole thing will be smooth. Any comments at all? Think about it. No problems or anything to do yet. We're just easing into things. And we'll continue this discussion, this language issue, tomorrow. All right. I will see you guys tomorrow then.
Thank you.
Thank you.